When you're dealing with a critic, sometimes you have to understand what is the base fear or what is the base concern that they have. Well, like, what are they really asking, not what did they ask. What they're really asking is what makes you qualified to teach. I think for most moms, what qualified them for teach was giving birth. And then teaching them to eat, teaching them to walk, teaching them to talk and communicate, teaching them to share emotions, potty training them. Like, suddenly, because I teach them all of these major life skills that they need to survive, I'm not qualified to teach them 2 + 2 = 4. Like, what is learning? Do you mean, again, you can throw this back, do you mean are they able to take a test and pass the test, or are they actually learning? Like, what are you asking? That triggered me because what you're really saying is I'm not smart enough to teach my child how to add, multiply, divide, or I'm not smart enough to help my child get the help they need, the tutoring they need, or whatever. If we come across a subject, like, you're questioning my competence and my ability, not my child's. What was the most socially anxious time of your life? Probably in school. Some kids, whether it was bullying, peer pressure, just insecurities of inferiority, any of those things, right, creates more social anxiety than being at home. Hey everybody, hope you're having a good day. We are here today for teaching tips. I'm Randy Pratt, the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Masterbooks, and this is Brittany Pratt, my daughter, and publicist and social media manager. It's going to be really fun, I think, going through today's questions. We're going to talk about dealing with the critics. Now, this is my opinions, and as I always say, eat the meat, spit out the bones. If something doesn't minister to you, throw it away. And I may be actually a little animated with some of these questions. So, let's just... Passionate. Yeah. So let's have some fun with the questions.
Okay.
All right.
Really quick, I do want to say good morning to Jess, Carissa, Laura, Desiree, Sweetly Seen, 82, Jenny joining us, Angela, Moira, Jayla, Tabby, Carol, Christy. It's good to see everybody. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah.
Angela asked, one of the critics she gets, or critiques I should say, is you're not a teacher, why do you think you can teach them?
That's interesting. So the only people that are qualified to teach would be teachers. I mean, you have to see, we all have biases, right? And so our bias is the worldview that we have in the bias, and we're going to look for things that confirm our bias. When you're dealing with a critic, sometimes you have to understand what is the base fear or what is the base concern that they have. Well, like, what are they really asking, not what did they ask, and then try to address that, or just defend yourself a little bit so that almost like calling them out for it if their bias is so strong. So in a case like this, what they're really asking is what makes you qualified to teach. I think for most moms, what qualified them for teach was giving birth, and then teaching them to eat, teaching them to walk, teaching them to talk and communicate, teaching them to share emotions, potty training them. Like, suddenly, because I teach them all of these major life skills that they need to survive, I'm not qualified to teach them 2 + 2 = 4 unless I go and get certified by the state. Is that what qualifies a parent to teach their child? And when you look at the statistics, I'm going to refer to this a lot. Dr. Brian Ray, if you do a Google search for Dr. Brian Ray, National Home Education Research Institute, there's a lot of research to support the data. Okay, never mind.
The loudspeaker just went off over the office.
Yes. So there's a lot of statistical data that shows the research that I'm talking about regarding home education. And so as we go through this, we'll get more of these questions, but that's something that I would definitely bring up, that what qualified me to teach my child or my wife to teach our child would be giving birth and being called a parent. That's what we're really doing. Parenting and teaching are the same thing. It's not just babysitting until I can turn them over to somebody the state said was qualified to teach my child.
Awesome. Jayla said, how do you know your child is on pace since you don't test or have to? She said that's always an argument.
Well, you can test. I mean, that's an option. And on paces, are they continuing to learn? And are they continuing to gain knowledge? Like, what is learning? Do you mean, again, you can throw this back, do you mean are they able to take a test and pass the test, or are they actually learning? Like, what are you asking? You know, and if as far as testing goes, a lot of states do require testing. Again, academically, statistically, students score significantly higher on annual testing in states that they have to be tested in. So, I mean, I think another thing we as homeschool parents have to address is our own insecurities. And so we have to be comfortable with the fact that when somebody says something, really what they're doing is criticizing us, right? If somebody says to you, if a mother-in-law says to you, you know, your kids need to be in public school because I trust the school system more than I trust you, that pricks an insecurity. And so we have to identify that insecurity to be able to stand up against that and say, that triggered me because what you're really saying is I'm not smart enough to teach my child how to add, multiply, divide, or I'm not smart enough to help my child get the help they need, the tutoring they need, or whatever. If we come across a subject like, you're questioning my competence and my ability, not my child's. And once you can become comfortable with understanding what it is that's really affecting me, then I can begin to craft an answer to reply to the actual question that they're asking.
Awesome. SLB for God said, my child has social anxiety. The critics say he then should be in a social setting so he learns to get along. What is your response?
Okay, so social anxiety, right? I mean,
I'm going to tie this question with the next one. Van Horn Family 7508 said, what do you do to socialize your kids?
Okay, so social anxiety. Let's take one of the most stressful, for any of us who went to public school, or private school for that matter. What was the most socially anxious time of your life? Probably in school. Some kids, whether it was bullying, peer pressure, just insecurities of inferiority, any of those things, right, creates more social anxiety than being at home. Okay, let's say I have an infection in my foot, and what that person is actually saying is the best way to cure the infection would be to stick it in sewage. I mean, are you absurd? That's not the way you cure social anxiety, is by sticking it in something more toxic and more anxiety prone than trying to help them learn to cope with situations and to be able to do it in a way that I manage those interactions and don't put them in toxic relationships. How many of you remember going to school where you were afraid of the kid who was in the locker next to you, or you were afraid to use the bathrooms, or to go to the bus, or to go to gym class, right? Like, talk about social anxiety and toxic relationships. Now, if you listen to any self-help coaching model for adults, what are they going to tell you? They're going to tell you not to put yourself in toxic relationships and surround yourself with healthy relationships and learn to identify that. But we're saying, no, let's force our kids into a situation full of toxic people and socially anxious situations. And again, I'm generalizing and making things broad because that's basically what's being said. If schools were beautiful, healthy, nurturing places like they claim to be, we wouldn't see some of the things we see coming out of the school system.
Jess, Carissa, and Ashley all said that they're adults and sometimes have social anxiety, and they all went to public school. So there you go. Sweetly Singing 82 said, my kids have more social engagements homeschooling than they ever did in public school. We literally have to turn engagements down.
Well, I cause my kids social anxiety all the time. So my kids are homeschooled, and I cause them social anxiety. But that's not the point. Okay, go ahead.
So, Van Horn Family, what do you do to socialize your kids? The second part of that.
Okay, so let's look at socialization, and this will cover a lot of the questions we have. the public school system says, listen, this is the best way to do this. I take a 5-year-old and I put them in a school with 24 other 5-year-olds, and they're there all day, 5 days a week, 180 days. And then next year, we're going to take that same group of 24 kids, or however many kids are in that school at the same age, and we're going to move them to the next level. And they're going to stay with that group, that age group of kids, pretty much until they're in high school. And then even pretty much in high school, they're going to kind of be grouped into their age range. With homeschooling, we have a really great opportunity. That would be horizontal socialization. So a lot of kids come from a model of horizontal socialization. They're used to socializing with kids their own age group. In homeschooling, we can vertically socialize. So our students get exposure to very young children, children their age, older children, adults, grandparents. They also get exposed to delivery people and different ranges of clerks and business people. And throughout the strata, they have exposure to a wider range and vertically socialized. So when someone says, what about socialization? It's pretty easy to say, but statistically, the studies show that homeschoolers perform significantly higher in emotional, social, intellectual tests than public school students. So it's coming from a place of ignorance. You just don't understand that there's such a narrow window that most children are exposed to, where my children are getting exposed to a much broader range of people. What do? We work to make sure that they're with us, that they're exposed to a broader range of people. We do engage in different things, that the kids are able to participate, youth groups, and there's 4-H and there's sports, there's different things that you can do to give supplements to bring in engagement. But public school is not the only place to be socialized.
Yeah, my favorite thing growing up was when we'd go out places. We used to go bowling a lot, where you go to a grocery store and everybody's like, oh, you're homeschooled, well, how do you socialize? And you're like, what are we doing right now? Like, I thought we were having a conversation,
When one of my sons, when he graduated, he was used to being with adults all the time, right? So at night, like, he moved into his own apartment, and what he would do is he'd go to the local coffee shop, and the older people would play cards, and he'd be there playing cards with all the older people. Like, that was his favorite peer group, because he felt like he could just relate to them better and talk with them more, and they weren't as immature as some of the kids in his own age group. Yeah. So he would just hang out playing cards.
Tabby A said, yes, when I graduated, I was so used to only being with my age that I was terrified talking to older adults.
Yes.
Joyful Mommy said, my question is a follow-up on to your last couple of teaching tips regarding empathy and coaching, so maybe it doesn't fit into today's teaching tip, but I'm curious what you do when a child resists your coaching.
I protect them. So we have systems and rules and discipline to protect them in that spot. If you think about it, I can coach somebody in how to drive a car, and I can say the speed limit is 55 and this is how you drive 55. I can encourage them, I can help them. If they resist that and go over the speed limit, then there are systems in place to protect us from people who disregard the rules and disregard coaching and advice. And so that would be a whole nother kind of how do we set up discipline structures and how do we make sure the rules are clear and that. But that gives us kind of the safety guidelines that we can work with. So we can hit that in another teaching tips. I think that'd be a great one. But that would be my quick answer, is to protect them.
Yeah, I wanted to read Jess's comment. She said, my public school teachers always told me we weren't at school for socialization. I talked a lot in class and usually had to sit by the teacher's desk in elementary. So did you?
I did, yeah.
Sweetly Seeing 82 said, if your child only learns only one view, how can you consider their education unbiased, open, and more importantly, complete? Do they need to learn all points of views and choose for themselves? Just a question, especially referring to those in high school. One I hear, it's not my question, don't shoot the messenger.
Well, isn't that a funny question, really? Because shouldn't they hear all points of view and be unbiased? All education is biased, let's be honest. Anytime I'm teaching or I'm giving a worldview, today my bias is for homeschooling. I believe in it. I've seen the benefits. I've been homeschooling for plus years. We have 9 kids. 5 have launched into life successfully. I've just seen the fruits of homeschooling, so I support it. So that's my bias, and so I'm teaching from a point of my bias. So all education is bias. We put that out of the way. If they should get all points of view, that's really interesting, because as a Christian and a believer, I would like my child to also receive my point of view in a public school system. So does that mean that it's okay for them to go into science class and ask the science teacher to please teach from the point of creation? But that's not the bias that they're going to teach it from. And so that you can't, what you're saying is, don't you think that your student should actually be learning a humanistic bias versus a biblical bias that I'm going to teach my child? I'm proud of the fact that I teach my children according to my bias, which is a biblical worldview, which I believe better equips them for life than a humanistic worldview, which equips them for death. That's just, like, to me, that's an easy answer to that. Somehow the public school is so much more open-minded, and homeschooling is closed-minded. We actually discuss some very sensitive topics as a family, and I think that my kids actually do receive a more unbiased education, but we always do it from the perspective of a biblical perspective, because we believe the Bible to be God's manual for life. He created a manual for his creation, and it's the Bible. And so we start there, and then we begin to look at the world from that, versus a humanistic worldview, which says man gets to define the rules, and and we look at it from that viewpoint and look at the problems we're having. Okay.
Awesome. What it said, you can't shelter your kids from the world. They won't be able to socialize if you don't take them to school to find their own. How will they make friends if you homeschool? We kind of covered that a little bit.
Yeah.
The second one is it even legal?
Homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. Yes, there are requirements that have to be followed with the state. And as long as you comply with the legal requirements of the state, obviously the state has determined that homeschooling is a valid education. So it wouldn't be legal. Like, in every school district, the superintendent of education in that school district is responsible for educating the students in his school district. Private school, homeschooling, public school are all valid forms of educating a student, as long as you follow the requirements set forth by the state and that the school district and the superintendent manage.
Awesome. Taylor Smart said, what are you even actually teaching them? You're going to make them miss important things that are taught in school by actual teachers.
Like what? I mean, ask them what are they talking about? What important things are they talking about? In today's day and age, what is it that you think my students should be learning that they're not? And why am I not equipped to teach them about those topics? And what makes person A, B, or C equipped to talk about those topics? When I went to public school, I had Christian teachers, I had atheist teachers, I had agnostic teachers, I had all kinds of teachers, and each one taught the subject according to their worldview. It was very obvious when I had an atheistic science teacher what he believed in, and as he taught the class. So very broadly, we say, education or school, but we're actually talking also about individual teachers. We're talking about other students. We're talking about textbooks and the worldview that's coming through in the textbooks. So it's easy to say that you're missing something, but what am I missing? Like, qualify that for me. Help me understand, what exactly is it? What topics do you think we're missing? Fire safety, health, math, language, social studies, science? Like, what am I missing that I should be learning?
Awesome. Hope Allen 7 said, don't you worry that your kids will be sheltered from the real world, and how will they witness to others if you don't let them out into the world?
Okay, so this comes up quite a bit, and it's like salt and light question, like how are kids going to get saved? Number one, to me, the work of the Holy Spirit, his job is to convict the world of sin. That's what he does. Like, I can't be responsible for everybody, right? And I think I've used this example before. If I have a MMA fighting and I'm in a cage match, right? and you have professional fighters. Let's say we have a professional fighter in a cage match. Who is it?
Hope Allen.
No, who's the MMA?
McGregor.
He's not now champion, but
Poirier.
Okay, Poirier. So here he's in the ring, right? And I'm going to take my child who has no training, no experience, put him in the ring and say, go fight him. You can do it. Like, they're not equipped to deal with what they're going to get with adults and other kids. And like, that's a massive thing for a child to have to undertake. And then to say, but they're the light. Most kids get snuffed out in that situation because they're not equipped to go into the ring and fight at that level. And so what I'm doing in preparing my children and educating my children is discipling them to go into the ring so that their witness is effective. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't be effective in their sports teams. They can't be effective at 4-H, right? But I would also say to the critic, if the critic isn't working in a school and they're wanting my kid to go into the school, I'd be like, well, why aren't you in there? Why aren't you volunteering in the kitchen, in the cafeteria? Why aren't you driving a school bus? Why aren't you volunteering in the classroom? Like, if you have a heart for kids in the public school system, man, I support you in that. In fact, I'll even donate some money to that. You go get them. You go be the light to the world in the school system. And you know what? I'll prepare my child as best I can as well. That's a little aggressive and harsh.
It's a little,
But it's the same thing. Like, if that's your heart, good, I support you in that. Those kids need somebody who's grounded in their faith, who can stand and go in and support and rally them. My kid isn't ready for that yet. They're just not ready for that. You know, I've seen in different places where even a new believer, right? If you send a new believer into some situations that they're not ready for, it'll shake their faith. And so you want to make sure that they're ready for that. And I think that that's one of those arguments that people have. I have not seen that work out well. I mean, been at this game a long time, raised a lot of kids alongside with other families raising kids. And we've heard the salt and light argument. More times than not, I've seen those kids adopt the worldview, ideas, philosophies of their peers in the school system than spreading the philosophies of everybody else. So when that question is asked, 100%, I would say, you know what, if you have a heart for the public school system and the Lord is calling you to be an evangelist to those kids, man, I support you in that. I'll write a letter of recommendation for you to you know, whatever it takes. I'll help you get in there and be the light. So go you. Okay.
Desiree also said, are you sharing the gospel? Because if you aren't, your kid isn't either.
Truth.
That's good.
Truth.
Leslie said, 1, your kids will never be adjusted, never being exposed to all different kinds of people. The fact you're not letting your kids go to school must mean they're stuck up to all kids of all backgrounds.
Okay. What do you want from that, right? I mean, somebody's accusing my kids of being stuck up. Whatever. I mean, no, I don't want my kids to adopt the philosophies of every worldview that's out there. I don't. I don't want them to believe that some things like homosexuality is going to produce life in their life. It doesn't. I don't want to see them somehow enlightened by the world to believe that putting man at the center of creation somehow brings life. It doesn't, right? So I'm not going to influence them to those influence. I'm not going to expose them to those influences. I'm hyped.
I know, it's funny, because someone is like, yeah, whatever, she's laughing at that, and then everybody's like, no, go ahead and be aggressive, and Sweetly See's like, be aggressive, be aggressive, cute pom-poms.
Well, we started homeschooling 25 years ago. We've been doing this for a long time. We've supported a lot of families. I used to fly a lot for business, and I love telling people, you know, how many kids do you have? 9 kids. And then they'd ask, wow, how do you do that? And then we'd talk about homeschooling, and they'd start going. And it's actually such an opportunity to point to the biblical truth and to authority. I'm a father, and the Lord has given me certain accountability and responsibility to raise my children. And I'm going to do that. And I'm the one who stands accountable for them. When I stand before the Lord on the day of judgment and He asks me to give account for the things He gave me to steward, one of them is my children. And I don't want to say I farmed them out and ignored their spiritual upbringing or those developmental years, right? Because that's what society asks me to do, when I know that I'm equipped to do that. The Holy Spirit in me equips me to train my children. And this time is so short. Like, we only have a few years to have an influence. It's a limited amount of time. And then you can tell, like, the moment your children's hearts start to, they're adults and they start to take on their own way, we only have this like short period of time that we have to influence our children and to give them the tools that they need to succeed in life. But beyond life, I want my children to exceed eternally, and not just here in the present, but I want to see them beyond here. I want to see them in the presence of Jesus with me. Okay.
Julia said, as for sheltering them, I heard Israel Wayne say, what are they going to accuse me of next? Feeding and clothing them? That's hilarious.
That's good.
Abia said, people always told my mom and sister that we were going to rebel some days because we're homeschooled. It hasn't happened yet, and we're in our late 30s. Maybe soon. Who knows?
I've talked about that before. When people would tell me that, I would absolutely rebuke them. Like, you want to see me get angry? Tell me wait till my kids are teenagers. And I'll tell you, well, when my kids are teenagers, they are going to be phenomenal. My kids are known by the Lord. They know the Lord. They're taught of the Lord. And great is their peace. And that is the promise that I've held and will continue to hold for my children. And I have not had rebellious teenagers. My teenagers are awesome. Every one of them is awesome. And so are my adult children. It's the toddlers you have to worry about. It's not teenagers.
Her second one was, your kids will be weak and won't know how to problem solve. And 3, who will hire you if you spend all your best years homeschooling?
Okay, 2 questions. My kids are weak. Okay. I mean, yeah, they're kids. They're kids. And so if I want my kids to learn how to survive in gangs or to go to prison and survive in a prison, then I'll hire somebody to teach them that skill. When it comes to preparing them to deal with peer pressure and the social issues and to deal with all of the things that they're going to have to face when they become adults, then I'm going to do that.
Awesome. And then who will hire you if you spend all of your best years homeschooling?
So you're basically making God so small. I mean, seriously, a man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. The book of Proverbs is beautiful. And that right there, like you're saying, the favor of the Lord, another verse that I love, the favor of the Lord makes one truly rich and he adds no sorrow to it. Sorrow, toil, painful labor. Like, God is God. And I have seen so many times, and I could tell testimony to testimony, where when we've put God first in obedience to his word, where he takes care of the details. So I'm operating from a position of faith, not fear. And when it comes to stepping out and being obedient to what the Lord is asking us to do, he is always taking care of us. So for me to be so small-minded is to say that God can't provide for me because I'm doing what I begged him to do, to become a parent. Like, we had 1 child, then we had 2 miscarriages, and we really sought the Lord, and he said, enlarge the place of your tent, and he gave us 8 more children, and it was a blessing. And so now we get to parent and equip these children. Like, that's the blessing we wanted. That's what life is about. And I talked about it in the past, but sometimes I have those, like, the deathbed reflections on the day, if it was my last day, if today was my last day on earth, what would I want? What would be important to me? I tell you what, not one of the jobs that I've had would be important to me. Like, not as important as my children, not as important as the relationship I have, not as important as if they were serving the Lord and known by the Lord. Those are the things that matter to me. So when I look at from that place, from a end of life backward position, that's what I care about. So whether somebody thinks I got a job or a beautiful house or anything like that, none of that. Not one of the houses, if today was my last day, there isn't one that I'm going to say, I just wish I worked harder to have a better house. That just isn't going to be part of the conversation that day. I know it's not. So I want to live my life in such a way that when that day comes, I say I lived my life to the fullest because I'm focused on what was important. Man, that was a rant.
That was good.
I'm kind of ranting the whole thing. Let's go.
Your mom said, "This one makes me so sad. I don't know how you do it. I couldn't spend that much time working with my kids each day."
In that case, what I would say is I enjoy being with my kids. They're my best friends. That's my truth. If I had to send my kids on the bus, like we did this for a year. I was a principal actually of the school that my oldest went to. But we would put her on the bus and she would go and be with the kids and then come home and I'd have babysitting rights at night. Well, we did the homework that should have been done during the day and then we'd put her back on the bus the next day. That was miserable. Homeschooling isn't miserable. Like in homeschooling, all the bad habits that they pick up during the day, you leave at the bus and we're able as a family to be very close. And I think that's, we were blessed yet last night to be able to hang out with the Mudd family and to watch them. They visited 20 states in 2 weeks, 83 hours in the car, and they were all just like adventure, and you could tell they were just a unit. Like it was in the sweetest, most social kids, right? Yeah. I mean, I've spent enough time around homeschoolers that it's like I know the fruit of it, and so it's hard to convince me of anything different, but okay.
My best friend Jess said, "You don't have a teaching degree, so what makes you qualified to teach your child? That's what real teachers should do, not parents." A lady who I went to school with and is a secretary at my kid's old public school said it to me a few months ago at a birthday party.
Yeah, isn't that one of those where you'd like to be, well, you don't have a degree, what qualified you to open your mouth? But because it's coming from such a place of ignorance, right? Like, the only way you're equipped is if you go to a state school or a college school that teaches you a little bit from some textbooks on the current educational philosophy, and yet look at the United States education system. Like, if you're also brilliant, how come you can't be placed in the higher position with other countries? Like, because you hold to these man-based education systems or philosophies which change all the time, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to trust that that's the best way for our kids. Like, you've drank the Kool-Aid, lady. That's just wrong.
Start off with the shock factor of what qualifies you to open your mouth, and then she won't ask any more questions. I say maybe start with that, and then you can go into details if you need to.
I'm trying my hardest to show love and kindness and gentleness, meekness, and self-control. These are just fun questions.
Hannah Meadows said, "I totally don't mean to get political, but I've actually had someone tell me that I shouldn't have the right to choose my child's education in homeschool because of our biblical beliefs and our political opinions. How do you defend the right to biblical educate your children to those who aren't followers of Christ?"
Well, it's just a dangerous philosophy, isn't it? Somebody who believes that I shouldn't have the right. Today, it's me. Today, you believe that I shouldn't have the right because of my beliefs and my systems. But you know what? Tomorrow it will be you. And religious liberty isn't just about Christianity. It's in fact, religious liberty can become very intolerant in some cases. That's the course that we have, the history of religious liberty, is a great read for that. It's a slippery slope as to who gets to open their mouth, who gets to do what. At some point, who gets to have children, right? I mean, I can decide that only blonde people have children because blonde people are perfect. Oh, that happened actually in Nazi Germany. And so that slope that they say, basically they're saying, we don't think you're qualified to teach and because of your views, and they don't agree with mine. So now I'm putting myself in a spot where I can shut you down so that other people have the right. But that's a very dangerous thing because it can flip very quickly on people.
Claire Boyd said, "I have a teaching degree from a large state school. People are overestimating what teachers are taught."
Yeah, there's a lot I could say because I was a principal, and sometimes in the schools it was really frustrating with certified teachers because of the bias and the system that they had of education, getting them to think a little bit outside the box with students. Like if you were an average student or above average student, you were fine. If you were a student that was challenged or didn't fit into the normal box, it was very frustrating.
Amy Sue said, if you shelter them from the world now, they will rebel more later.
That counter to Scripture. Scripture says, teach them in the way they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart from it. And what I found is there's a difference. There's a difference between sheltering. Homeschooling isn't about sheltering. Homeschooling is preparing them to get into the ring. If I'm homeschooling from a position of fear, then they're gonna be clueless when they get into the ring. Every one of my kids has to go and get into the ring with McGregor. They have to. That's just life. That's called life. And the enemy is waiting. I want to make sure that when they get into the ring, they're gonna be able to defend themselves. They're going to be able to inflict some damage and survive the ring. So I think that's more the mindset is I'm not holding them back, and I'm not sheltering them and then throwing them into the ring, because they're not going to be any more prepared. Homeschooling is about preparing them for success in life and helping them have the best chance when they have that moment.
Awesome. Jess said, I love this community. Sweetly Singing said, so true, Jess. We are iron sharpens iron. In this together for our families in Christ.
Awesome.
Tiffany said, yes, all of these questions. Or how do you expect your child to be able to play well or with other kids besides their siblings if they're not in public school? We've been homeschooling 3 years and part of groups and still get questioned on this from family.
I went to public school. I did not play well with others. In fact, one of my first big corporate jobs, the report card they gave me was, I did not play well with others. That was, it doesn't guarantee that a child is going to play well with others. Again, when it comes to the socialization issue, what socialization are they missing? Ask them to qualify that. What are you talking about when you're talking about socialization? And if my kids are a little shy around other kids and stuff like that, that can happen in the public school system as well. But even if not, that doesn't mean that my kids can't survive in social situations. And we prepare them for that. Want to know how to prepare a child for social situations? I'll give you one of the best case scenarios. Brittany loved this philosophy of education. Send them into McDonald's to order 22 double cheeseburgers, 9 fries, and 9 Cokes. Right? Because our family, that's what we would do, right? And when you have to go in and do that, that equips you for social situations, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, because that's life. Have them do things. I made my son yesterday go into the bank and send a certified letter. And it was awkward and it was painful. It was painful for him. It was painful for the teller at the post office. But they did it. The two of them worked it out.
That's how I learned how to write checks, because I had to take stuff over to your insurance guy and write a check out to him.
Yeah. I mean, my kids get a lot of real world experience. So.
Yeah. Okay, a little bit of a long question. So Jenny Hoover said, oh, this is just what I needed. I've been trying to lovingly communicate to my husband that this is what I know is best for my kids next year. I struggle to communicate my thoughts, and we often struggle to communicate. So this has caused me so much anxiety. However, I know without a doubt it's what God wants for us. So question. He says, this is her husband, they're getting an $8,000 a year education at their public school, and that is the best education and situation for them. We aren't taking them from that. Also, it's not sustainable for you to teach them through high school. A little bit of a background story. She has 3 children. Currently, her oldest is in full-time public school, 5th grade. Her younger 2 are doing cyber full-time at the same school, 1st and 3rd. Next year, she plans to homeschool because the kids are asking for that. Her oldest will be in 6th, and she loves people and thrives at public school, so that is why she's still there. But she's recently been struggling with the kids' bad influences there. She loves her teachers, but hates constantly being bombarded with sex talk and swearing. That's all in 5th grade, so we're starting to think of other options for her as well.
So the average homeschool family spends $600 a year per student. Studies show that the average homeschooler performs significantly higher on standardized tests, performs better in life, and is socially scores higher in psychological tests as well. Okay, so for $600, a homeschool family can provide a solid education that equips them better than a public school student in most cases. What I would say is any institution that has to spend $8,000 to educate the student when a homeschool family can do it for $6,000 probably isn't a model that we would want to look at. And right, and I mean, the education system, I get that there's resources and there's a lot of different things that you can get from the public school system, and I'm thankful for a public school system. I am, because it provides an education and helps all of us in society. But when it comes to my children, I believe that homeschooling is the best alternative. It's the best private school I can give them. I was a principal at a private school. I graduated from a private school. A lot of the same issues that are happening in public schools are happening in private schools. It's still dependent on teachers. It's still dependent on the kids that they're sitting next to in school. I still don't believe that kids are equipped to fight some of those battles or have those philosophies. I can do that better, I believe. And when I can't, I can find somebody to come in and help me do that. So, I think that place of conviction where you know that the Lord is calling you to, He'll equip you to do that. To me, that argument probably is that the base fear that he's coming from necessarily? Is it that if we choose to homeschool, you won't be able to do it? And I'm concerned about that. And I think that's part of being in a community like that, even, and like this, and being able to say, yeah, some days are messy. Like, that's life. But you know what? I went to public school, and some days were messy. I remember the kids having to go to the principal's office. I remember being one of those kids. I remember teachers melting down and having to leave the room crying because I was one of those kids. Like, I made a couple teachers cry. I would have made my mom cry if she had homeschooled me, for sure. So I think it'd be a fun conversation.
A lot of people are also recommending to read Education Has Gotta Have an Opinion by Ezra Wayne on our website.
Yep.
Caitlin Campbell said, my husband said you can try it for a year and we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. But I would let him know that, I'm also going to ask for room for growth, that I'm going to learn and I'm going to continue to grow. And I don't need you to fix everything. Like, we're going to have some trial and error and some things aren't going to work. It may be a little messy, and that's okay. That's part of the process. But we're going to learn. And because if you're held to the standard of it has to be perfect, then that's a lot of pressure for you too. If I make a mistake, then he's going to want to send them back to public school. That's not reality. So reality is, we're going to homeschool and we're going to succeed at this. It's going to be great. Mm-hmm. But there may be a couple messy days, and that's okay because all of us have experienced those messy days.
Right. The follow-up to Caitlin's comment about try it for a year and we'll see how it goes. She said we're on year 2 now and you can't imagine sending them to school. So if that's any encouragement.
Yes.
Sunshine said, how do you handle constant questioning from grandma, my mother, via the phone? Are they around enough kids? Are they out enough? Why isn't my 4-year-old in any activities? Sign them up for more things and I'll pay for it. Ugh, it just gets so tiring. I love telling her about what they are learning and doing and share pictures, but the questions are all about them being social enough.
Well, the socialization, understanding vertical socialization, and my children are exposed to more, I think is one way you can do that. The book Boundaries by Henry Cloud is a great book as well. I would recommend reading that. I think it's valuable for us as parents to read it, and I think it's valuable for us as children, adult children, to read it as well. And what I would say, there may be a place where you just have to have a conversation with mom and say, when you ask these questions, this is where I feel. I feel like you're saying, I'm not equipped to raise my children and to make sure that their needs are looked out for. And so I would appreciate if you would stop, or if you have concerns, that you would come to me and not make the children undermine what I'm doing, making the children questioning me as their parent. And those aren't always pleasant conversations, but sometimes they're just necessary. I like the phrase, we teach what we tolerate, and when that continues to happen, we can't sidestep it sometimes. We just have to confront it. And that's why I say, once I've dealt with my insecurities, what is really being said here? Is it really socialization? Because I've actually been in some very hot situations with parents who wanted to homeschool and grandparents who said, if you do, we will cut you off. We'll cut you off emotionally, we'll cut you off monetarily, like we will cut you off if you choose to homeschool. And what it came down to is, what will people think of us if our children are homeschooling our grandchildren? Which is very narrow-minded, because what we got to see next was horrible. The children wanted to be homeschooled because they were trying to avoid something that was happening in public school, and then that happened, and now the whole family, what did everybody think about what that family had gone through? And it was much more tragic than if they had just chosen to homeschool. And so I think having those conversations is of value.
Kim Kelly said, it seems a lot of questions are about socialization. Certain family members remind me often that my son is an only child. Like, somehow I forget this. And that he needs to be with other kids his own age. He also is very shy and is in speech therapy, so they imply that I am doing him a disservice by homeschooling.
Yeah, those are hard places, right? Because, again, they're questioning your ability to parent your child. And I'm assuming if you have your child in speech therapy, that you are already addressing the need that your child has. And you still have the ability. We've done the video on homeschooling a single child to engage the child in other activities with people. It doesn't have to all be with children their own age. I mean, that's great. But it can also be with other adults. As an adult, I work with 23-year-olds. I work with 60-year-olds. I mean, I work with all ages. And so I think, in a case like that, again, it may just have to be, you can even kind of use the growth hacking. Like, we're homeschooling. It may not be perfect. We get better all the time. We give ourselves room for growth as well. But, I'm not going to continue answering the question to say, I'm not going to continue answering this question about whether or not he's getting socialized. Like, that's up to me, and you can trust me or not, but please stop asking.
Caitlin Morris said, your support or lack thereof won't sway me. I want your support, but I will continue to do what I am called to do, even if you don't support it.
Yes, and as difficult as that conversation is, sometimes it's necessary, because what that says is, I'm an individual, I recognize my responsibility, I'm stepping up to the plate, living out my responsibility, and I either have your support or I don't, but I'm going to do what I know I need to do.
And Kim Kelly said, thank you. I feel like I'm a broken record. LOL. Danielle said, are you going to do this forever, like even in high school? As in, are we qualified? And how will we teach complicated subjects before simple math and reading in elementary school?
So then you could say, so what you're saying is, I'm not qualified to teach anything more than 2 + 2 = 4? Is that what you're saying? Like, make them uncomfortable. Make them qualify what they just said. So you're basically saying that I can't teach much more than the basics. I don't know how to do this, or I'm not even smart enough to go find somebody who does know how to teach that. Or I can't find a textbook, like a masterbooks textbook and Masterbooks Academy, to help my child get through algebra. Like,
good plug.
Yeah, thank you. Like, wow. Like, that's a slam, isn't it? Make them feel uncomfortable for asking you that. Like, shame on you for asking me that. That's awful. Am I going to do this for life? Absolutely. Absolutely. My daughter next to me is 23 years old. Am I still homeschooling her? Absolutely. We're not doing it with textbooks. It's called discipleship. It's living side by side. It's giving advice and insight. It's trying to help her. I will be doing this until the day I die with my children. I was on the phone with one yesterday about a job. I was at lunch talking with another one. Like, all the time I'm going to homeschool my children, because we've been doing this since you were in kindergarten, right? That's what we do in life. And now I'm not in the ring. I've trained her to be in the ring. Now I'm outside the ring, like Rocky, you know?
I'm here like, Son McGregor.
Dun, 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 dun. And I'm like, swing, put your hand up, block your face. Don't let him keep hitting you in the face. Kick him in the shins. Kick him in the shins. Like now I'm on the sideline coaching.
Hey, Dad, we did it.
And you know what? They're on my ring too. There's now she's standing on side of my ring too, saying, you can do this. I see what you've done. We did it today. Today she was at my ring. Yesterday I was at her ring. Like now we're adults supporting each other in the fight. But I do intend to continue educating my children, because every time I gain an insight, like I love coming to Brett and the kids and saying, guess what I just learned? Here's a fun one, okay? A pig can declare it's a racehorse all day long. It's not going to make it a racehorse, but it can be a really fast pig. Isn't that amazing? I love that.
That was one of the things the other day. We had a conversation about that. We had a conversation this morning about, I was like, hey, let me ask you this. I was like, if a belt holds your pants up, but the belt loop holds your belt up, I was like, who's the real hero? So then we got into it about...
Very philosophical.
It was very philosophical. Anyways, Mindy said, I struggle more with people questioning my kids when it sounds more like testing. The next biggest things about socialization and how weird my kids will be for how naive they will be.
I hope my kids are peculiar. I hope my kids stand out like a sore thumb in society. Can you imagine when David, young boy David, stepped out onto the battlefield in front of Goliath and the Philistines? He wasn't acting like the children of Israel and Saul. He wasn't acting like a Philistine. He went and grabbed some smooth stones and said, I'm here in the name of God. That's what I want my children to be. I want them to be peculiar. I don't want them to be like everybody else. That's not what they're called to be. They're called to be peculiar. They're called to stand out. And that's what we're preparing them for. Okay.
Okay. M. Steinby said, spreading the gospel. If all of the Christians homeschool, who will witness to the kids in public school? So you kind of hit on that a little bit. K14 said, we accidentally began homeschooling. My intent was to homeschool one of our 4 because of his autism and ADHD. His public preschool teacher didn't know how to handle him. I've had lots of family go against me. Everything he's been asked or said that you have been criticized on, I have heard. The public school didn't teach my oldest a thing. But what they wanted them to learn was on the state test so they could get more money. We also moved around a lot because of the military. Lots of schools are on tight budgets. They are old and only get renovated. That is how you want our kids to learn, and it's where you want to allow your kids to socialize. Since our kids are different ages, they interact with different with each other, and they can leave the house and interact with other kids their age and below and above. Sorry, I'm like reading this in the phone. Since COVID-19, we don't interact with too many people. I'm an introvert anyway. I'm trying to find a question. I thought there was a question, and then it wasn't because it was on the question list. My son-in-law is highly frustrated with Christians who homeschool. He says things like, why would you take the light out of public school? To be honest, I wouldn't have homeschool except for COVID right now and can't see us going back.
That's one of those perfect ones. So you feel that the public education needs a light right now. If he says yes, then man, support him in getting into that school system and being a light to those children.
Awesome. Okay, one more.
Okay.
Mandy said, my parents are constantly offering to pay for a private school, Christian or otherwise, for our 3 kids. They will even talk to the kids separately when we are visiting together. My 5-year-old now wants to go to my nephew's school and has been giving me a run for my money with his homeschooling. My mother-in-law has only accepted your homeschooling journey as temporary during the pandemic and constantly says when they can finally go back to real school. And even when I defend a decision of homeschooling, I'm met with similar questions as above. What makes you qualified to teach them? Your kids need to be socialized with the other kids their age, and even they just spend too much time with you. It's not healthy for any of you.
My ability to speak into my children's life is an honor. It is not a right. That I see. And so don't abuse the kindness that you've been given to speak into my children's life and into my life as tolerance for promoting your agenda. And it's hard as a parent when we disagree with something to step back and let our children make their own decisions. Sometimes it's necessary for us to be put in our place and to be told, you lived your life. That's why I have therapy bills. You did it your way, and I'm getting therapy for that. Now we're going to do it our way, and our kids may have therapy bills. But this is my call, not yours. And I respectfully ask you to stop undermining and causing division in our family. And I think you can do that very humbly. I don't think it's always well received. I know the Boundaries course, we've done it as a church, we've done it as a family through church. Boundaries can be very difficult to set because when people are used to coming into other people's yards, suddenly hitting a fence isn't pleasant. And there's usually a little bit of a pain period as we kind of establish those boundaries. But part of becoming an adult is becoming an adult, and it's being respected. My role now isn't to come in and live my life through my children. My role is to support my children living their lives. And I think that's something that you really have to pray about, because it's a situation sometimes when it comes especially to family. Just, when I pastored, I would talk sometimes with the families, and I'd say it's kind of funny because they bring the father of the bride comes down the aisle, and the pastor says, who gives this woman to this man, and the father says, I do, and they kiss and hug and cry and everything else. But the mother-in-law doesn't do that with the son, and yet the scripture says that it's appointed for this reason, a man shall leave the authority of his father and mother and cleave to his wife, becoming his own unit and his own family unit. And so I think sometimes, especially in those cases, you have to establish those lines of, this is our family, and we're going to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit and what he's asking of us. And I wouldn't do this if I wasn't confident that the Holy Spirit is leading us to do this. And even if we make mistakes, we're going to continue to seek the leading of the Holy Spirit. And all we ask is that you trust us in that, and don't be a thorn, don't be divisive. So
really good question. Mindy would like to know. Let's say I have kids and I decide that homeschooling isn't for me. How do you handle that? What do you do?
I guess you'd have to be able to present that argument pretty solidly. I have to step back in that case and say, I'm not responsible for them. They are. He's going to cry pretty. You know it. In those places, the best thing I can do is I can give my counsel, but I don't think I can continue coming in and being divisive and try to break them. My kids don't always do everything I want them to do. That's not life. I have to encourage them. And sometimes we've had to go through and say, well, that was their decision. That's the decision. They're accountable to the Lord for the decisions they make in stewarding their children. Once they've left my authority, I don't have that responsibility anymore. I'm not responsible for your children. I was responsible for you. And I love and support you, even if that decision goes against, because our kids sometimes choose to go against what the Lord is asking. And they're children of the Lord, and he brings them into, it's a complicated question, but I don't think I would go easily into that dark night.
No, I definitely know that if I came to you and was like, hey, this is what we've decided to do, that you would be like, okay, can you tell me why, based on everything you've seen and we've done growing up, what is it that's challenging you to do that? Or do you feel like the Lord, you would definitely question the Lord's calling for that?
Mm-hmm.
You would want an answer. You wouldn't overstep your bounds, I don't think, but you would definitely challenge us to really know and understand why we feel that that is the right way to go.
Right. No different. To me, it's as serious as if they said, I'm renouncing my faith. I mean, I don't think homeschooling saves, but I think the influence of a secular humanistic education is dangerous, right? Placing my children under the counsel of the ungodly, dangerous. So it would be like if she came to me and said, we're no longer teaching Christianity, we're going to teach them secular humanism and atheism. I would be like, that breaks my heart for you, because I know the pain, even as a parent, what you're going to go through, right? So so there's just a lot of things that would go into that. It's not to me, the decision to homeschool or to just send them back to a public school system versus a Christian biblical education. That's a very serious thing. That's like choosing to feed a child or not feed a child. So it's not just, it'd be nice to homeschool, and it's like like the passion that you've heard in all of this, and what we do at Masterbooks and the fights that we fight and all of that, it's pretty deep, right? So if one of my, and again, I don't think homeschooling saves anybody. It's not that. It's just I've seen the fruit. And if you had eaten of a tree that had amazing fruit, and everybody else is eating of a tree that produces death, you're gonna be strong about it.
So there you go, Brittany. Are you going to feed your kids or not?
Exactly.
I don't have kids, so
I sound so radical, but I am kind of, aren't I?
Yeah. So good. That's what we got. Jill said, I think Brittany and Randy have the sweetest father-daughter relationship. Thank you. Alright, that's all we got today.
Good. Well, I hope this was a blessing. We went long, and I know we have a lot of families that are new in homeschooling, and you're facing some of the struggles that we all have in the past. Israel Wayne has got some great books. He's got the Critic's book, Top 10, Answers to the Top 10. No, what is it? I just had it.
Questions. Critics ask.
Yes, questions critics ask. He has The Education, Does God Have an Opinion book. That's a great book as well. So those are two great resources that I would get to help build a philosophy of education. And for me, I learned all these kind of chops to defend ourselves, but also through the years, my passion for homeschooling and the answers that I've had have helped a lot of other families homeschool, and their families have been blessed because of it. And I would just encourage you to really look at some of the questions and make sure that any triggers or insecurities, and then begin from that building to answer. And sometimes it's as easy as just saying, yes, we homeschool. That's it. I don't need to justify it. Your bias is strong. It's not going to do me any good to get into a debate with you. And then there's other times where it's just good to be able to lay down, here's the reasons we homeschool and why we're going to continue homeschooling. So, all right, guys, God bless y'all. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.